Hello and welcome to Chapter 10. Today we're going to talk about coaching and performance management. These functions are probably the most important things done in organizations, but oftentimes the things that are done the poorest. And we'll talk about some reasons for that and how we should make it a better process. It's important because these are things that change someone's behavior. And by changing someone's behavior, we impact the performance of the organization. We allow the organization to meet their goals and be effective. Okay, and if you think about situations you've been in where you've had managers do a performance appraisal on your performance, kind of think, was that a positive or negative experience? Because most people in the workplace, supervisors and employees, perceive it as a very negative experience when it in effect shouldn't be. Okay, and that's why it's so important that we talk about this. So performance management and coaching, what is that exactly? And as we said, most organizations have some sort of formal performance appraisal system. Normally there's some form that's used, it's done annually, to determine if someone's performance is meeting some sort of a standard. Performance management takes that a step further because it's kind of more forward-looking. It wants to know, what can we do to make things better? So it involves setting goals, providing feedback, coaching employees, implementing rewards, and individual development. And coaching as part of that overall process is a process that encourages employees to kind of look at what they're doing and accept responsibility for their performance and look at that and determine how to make that better. How can we be better? How can employees and managers partner and work toward goals and effectiveness together as a team? So there are two different coaching activities that the book talks about. One is coaching analysis, because first you have to analyze performance and understand the conditions under which it occurs. Okay, so we first need to analyze it and determine, is there poor performance? If there is, what are the reasons? And so on. Then we have to have a discussion with the employee. We have to have some sort of face-to-face communication where we talk about problems, we talk about solutions, and talk about how to go forward and maintain effective performance. So what happens during coaching, a couple different roles. The supervisor or manager, they're the main person that has to coach this employee because they're the one responsible for the employee, in a day-to-day manner. So coaching occurs in just the normal everyday relationship between supervisors, managers, and employees. And in a team-based organization, one of the primary roles of a supervisor is coaching. Okay, and then talk about HRD professionals, since that's what we are. We provide training in the process. How does this process work? What can you do to make the process more effective? Okay, and ensuring that the coach has the skills necessary to do coaching, because we're going to talk how a coach, it's not something that comes easy to some people. The skills have to be developed. They have to have interpersonal skills. They have to have communication skills. So HRD professionals are the ones that train and develop these skills, as well as encouraging coaching as a process in the organization, making sure that the organization, that the environment is supportive of this process, and that's part of organizational development, which we'll talk about in another chapter. And since coaching is an HRD intervention, HRD people are kind of at the root of making sure that it's okay and that it goes well and that it's effective. Okay, so if we're going to coach to improve poor performance, we have to first identify what is poor performance. And that's not as easy as you think, because it kind of means something different to everybody. Okay, it's sort of a subjective kind of thing. And on a general basis, if the behavior meets or exceeds the standard, we typically say that it's good behavior. If it fails to meet the standard, we say that it's poor. So we have to consider, how far does this behavior, can it deviate before we consider it poor? Okay, so managers, employees really need to agree on what is poor performance, and what is, what can we expect from their behavior. Once we identify that poor performance is an issue, the supervisor has to diagnose the cause of the deviation. They have to figure out what's causing this. I mean, it could be any number of things. Could be the employee wasn't trained. It could be a bad fit for the employee. It could be that the employee is having personal problems. It could be they don't have resources. So we need to find out, because it depends on what that cause is as far as what we do about it or how we go about fixing it. They have to then select some sort of a response to this sort of problem. Okay. So one thing too, that we have to keep in mind or consider is there's a lot of bias that enters into this whole thing, especially the whole performance appraisal process. There's so much bias that can enter into that, and part of HRD's job is just making supervisors, managers, and employees aware of this bias, because some people aren't even aware they're committing these various errors. So a lot of training and development goes into just making sure. Some common biases in the performance management process include the causal attribution theory. And this is a theory that describes the process by which people assign causes to their own and others' behavior. Okay, so something happens, and you either assign the cause to external things or to the person themselves. Okay, and then we have the fundamental attribution error, which happens probably quite often. And this is a tendency to over-attribute a behavior to a cause within a person rather than to the situation. So in other words, something happens, an employee makes a mistake, and the supervisor automatically assumes or comes to the conclusion that it's the fault of the employee, that they're either not knowledgeable, they're lazy, they're, not doing their job, versus maybe there's some external problem. Maybe it's a problem of resource or training. Employees do the opposite. When something goes wrong, employees tend to attribute the behavior to external circumstances and not themselves. So you can see how this sort of goes both ways. And it's just important that we are aware of biases in the whole system. Okay, so once we determine the problem and we know the problem, then we do a coaching analysis. Okay, so at this point, we have to analyze all the factors that contribute to the unsatisfactory performance, and then determine the appropriate response. Okay, so based on the assumption that poor performance can have multiple reasons, that means we have to really go through and analyze this to make sure what's going on. And this list of 9 questions, this is out of the text, is pretty good for sort of asking questions and doing an investigation. Okay, once we do that, then we need to have a coaching discussion. And this is designed to help the employee perform effectively. So the book talks about 2 different approaches, to this. The first approach is the Kinlaw approach that has 3 steps. The first one is confronting or presenting. And by doing this, the supervisor or manager needs to specify the performance to be improved and establish goals to help the employee change and improve. And make this feel more positive, not put a negative spin on it, but make it a positive thing, that's going to help the employee, it's going to help the company, that everybody wins. It's a win-win situation. The next step is to use reactions to develop information. The supervisor helps the employee examine the causes for poor performance, allows the employee to explain it, and ask the employee questions. And at the end of this particular step, the employee and supervisor should be in a position to agree upon the nature of the problem and its causes. Then lastly, there's resolving and resolution, where the employee takes ownership of the problem and agrees upon the steps needed to solve it. So at this point, both parties kind of commit, to going forward and what needs to be done. Okay, the second approach is the Forney's approach, and this has 5 steps. There's a lot of similarity between the two. So the first step is to get the employee's agreement that a problem exists. Then second step is mutually discuss alternative solutions. The third step, mutually agree on actions to be taken. And the fourth step, measure results. And the fifth step is to recognize achievements when they occur. And this kind of puts the positive back there where the employee is getting feedback, that things are going better, things are improving, because that helps the employee, continue the improvement process if they get this positive feedback. It's more motivating for the employee. So supervisors and managers need skills to do this. Like I said previously, it just doesn't happen automatically. So we have to make sure that they have the skills necessary. They have to be able to openly communicate with other people. They have to take a team rather than an individual approach to this. They have to team with employees. They have to value people. Okay, so we have to be able to make sure they can do this. They need communication skills. They have to be able to listen to employees and get them to understand what effective performance is, how to achieve it. They have to be able to get the employee to state what they think the problem is, why it's a problem, how they're going to remedy it. Okay, so they need to be able to have this two-way communication with the employee as a way to establish mutual trust. It's very important in a coaching relationship. They need interpersonal skills. Here again, in order to create trust with the employee, they have to show respect, objectivity, planning, consistency of behavior, building trust, integrity. All these things have to come into play. So part of HRD's job is to make sure that coaches have what it takes. For coaching to be effective, the coach has to be supportive. Okay, the coach can't come in and just do this, because it's something they have to do. They have to be truly supportive and be authentic and genuine in what they're saying. They need to use constructive criticism. Okay, they need to keep it behaviorally focused and not kind of turn it as a personal thing against the employee. They have to set mutual goals. There has to be organizational support for coaching, okay, or it won't work. Feedback is very important. This leads to increased employee satisfaction and commitment and reduced turnover. And we can measure all these things. Remember, we talked about how we evaluate HRD interventions. I mean, it's an important part of the process is to be able to evaluate that and measure results. Those are the main points for Chapter 10. I hope you found it interesting and kind of thought about your own self when you were working and feedback you got from your boss or different things, or how do you think you could have been coached better or differently? So kind of think about these issues. Thank you.